I discovered my brother was adopted, and the family secrets that changed everything. Reddit stories. There are moments in life when everything you thought you knew about the people closest to you is shaken to its core. When the secrets that lie beneath the surface rise to the top, leaving a family reeling from truths that were better left unsaid. This story begins with a seemingly ordinary family, a mother, father, and two children, living what appeared to be a picture-perfect life. But like many things, appearances can be deceiving. The cracks in their foundation had been there all along, waiting for the right moment to break through. Samantha, the youngest of the two siblings, had always been the quiet one. The one who observed rather than participated. The one who asked fewer questions and gave fewer answers. She had grown up in a household that valued harmony above all else, where any disturbance in the peace was quickly swept under the rug. Her older brother, Adam, had a different role in the family dynamic. He was the protector, the one who always seemed to know what to say and when to say it, keeping the peace and maintaining the facade of normalcy. They were a team, a unit that could weather any storm, or so they thought. Their parents, Sarah and Michael, were well-respected members of the community, known for their generosity, their charm, and their ability to always appear in control. They had built a life that many envied, an upscale home, successful careers, and a seemingly idyllic family life. But like the perfect painting, it was only a matter of time before the brushstrokes began to smudge, revealing the chaos that lay beneath. Samantha's suspicions began when she was still a teenager, though she couldn't quite put her finger on it. There were small moments, fleeting glimpses of something off, an unspoken tension between her parents when they thought no one was looking, a certain coldness that lingered in the air when Adam wasn't around. But she chalked it up to her overactive imagination, the kind of thinking that teenagers often indulge in when they don't fully understand the complexities of the adult world. It wasn't until she was in college that the cracks began to widen. Samantha had come home for the weekend, a rare occasion given her demanding school schedule. It was late on a Saturday night when she had stumbled upon a conversation between her mother and father that would change everything. She had been walking down the hallway, her footsteps light on the plush carpet, when she heard their voices coming from the living room. At first, she had assumed they were just talking about the usual mundane things. Work, the neighbors, the upcoming family reunion. But as she got closer, she heard something else, something more intense, more intimate. She paused in the shadows, her heart beating a little faster, a knot forming in her stomach. Her mother's voice was low, almost pleading. "I can't keep pretending, Michael. I can't keep pretending everything is fine when it's not. The kids deserve to know the truth." Her father's response was hushed, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. "Not yet, Sarah. They're not ready. You know what will happen if they find out." Samantha felt her breath catch in her throat. What truth? What was her father talking about? The words echoed in her mind, but she couldn't make sense of them. She had never seen her parents argue like this before. The warmth that had always been present in their home suddenly felt like a distant memory, replaced by an unfamiliar chill that settled in the pit of her stomach. She had retreated to her room that night, her mind racing with unanswered questions. What was the truth her parents were hiding? And why hadn't they told her and Adam? The next day, her father acted as though nothing had happened. He was his usual, charming self, making breakfast with a smile, asking about her classes, his attention fully on the present. But Samantha couldn't shake the conversation she had overheard. She wanted to confront her parents, to demand the truth, but she didn't know how. Her gut told her that if she pushed too hard, the illusion of their perfect family might shatter completely. The weeks that followed were filled with an uncomfortable silence, one that hung in the air every time they sat down for dinner or had a conversation about the future. Samantha began to notice little things she hadn't seen before. Her mother's frequent trips to the bathroom after dinner, her father's sudden change of topic, when she asked certain questions. There was a growing sense of unease in the house, a feeling that something was being concealed from her and Adam. But she couldn't figure out what it was. It wasn't until a few months later that the truth came crashing down. Adam had come home from college for the summer, and the atmosphere in the house was noticeably different. He had always been close with their parents, especially their father, who had always seemed to favor him, perhaps because of his easy confidence and natural charisma. But when Adam arrived, something was off. Their father seemed distant, as though he was avoiding eye contact, and their mother appeared overly anxious, fidgeting with her hands whenever she was near him. One evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Adam dropped a bombshell that neither Samantha nor their parents were prepared for. "I'm not staying here this summer," he said casually, his voice steady, but his eyes betraying something deeper, something Samantha couldn't quite place. Their parents froze, their forks halting in mid-air. "What do you mean?" their mother asked, her voice strained. Adam leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "I mean, I'm moving out. I've got my own place now. I don't want to stay here anymore." Samantha's heart skipped a beat. Her brother had always been the rock of the family, the one who kept everything together. To hear him say something like this was jarring. She looked at their parents, waiting for an explanation, but neither one said a word. Her father's face was pale, and their mother's eyes flickered nervously toward the door as though she wanted to escape. "Why, Adam?" Samantha asked, her voice trembling slightly. "What's going on? Why would you leave now?" Her brother's gaze softened as he looked at her. "There are things I can't ignore anymore, Sam. Things that don't make sense. I need some space to figure it all out." Samantha's mind was spinning. She had known something was wrong, but she hadn't expected it to be this big, this overwhelming. What could Adam have learned that would make him want to walk away from the only life he had ever known? And then, as if everything had been building up to this moment, their mother finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "You have to know the truth," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. "You both deserve to know the truth. It's time." The world seemed to slow down as Samantha's heart pounded in her chest. The truth? What could it be? And why had it taken so long for them to reveal it? Her mother turned to their father, her face a mask of sorrow. "Michael, it's time. We can't hide anymore, Huck." And then, in the stillness of that moment, Samantha's world began to unravel. The truth they had kept hidden for so long was far darker than she could ever have imagined. The truth hit Samantha like a tidal wave, sweeping away everything she thought she knew about her family and her place within it. The calm, composed facade of their perfect lives cracked open in that one moment, exposing the raw, jagged edges of a truth that had been buried deep within the walls of their home for years. Her mother, Sarah, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a tear slipping down her cheek as she looked at her children. Her voice trembled as she began to speak, her words heavy with the weight of secrets long kept. "The truth is," she started, glancing at Michael, who sat across from her, his face a mix of guilt and regret, "your father and I, we're not who you think we are. Our marriage, everything we've built, it's all been built on lies." Samantha sat frozen, her mind struggling to process the words that were slowly sinking in. Michael, her father, the man who had always been the pillar of strength, the one who could do no wrong, had been lying to them. But what kind of lies? What had been hidden all these years? Adam, who had been eerily quiet, his expression unreadable, finally spoke, his voice soft but steady. "You mean, all these years you've been hiding something from us? From me?" His eyes, usually filled with a confident, almost carefree energy, were now clouded with confusion and hurt. "What didn't you tell us before?" Sarah lowered her gaze, her hands clenched tightly in her lap as she spoke. "Because we were trying to protect you both. From the truth, from the pain. But now, it's no longer something we can keep hidden. We have to tell you, or it will destroy all of us." Michael, looking defeated, sighed deeply before speaking, his voice hoarse. Sarah's right. We've been lying, but not just to you too. To ourselves, too. We've been living in a lie. The truth is, I'm not your biological father, Adam, but Samantha felt the air leave her lungs, as though someone had punched her in the stomach. The room, once so familiar and comforting, suddenly felt cold, foreign. Her father, her real father, wasn't the man she had known all her life. Adam, equally stunned, recoiled as if struck. His hands tightened into fists, his knuckles white as he looked from Michael to Sarah. "What the hell are you talking about?" he demanded, his voice rising with disbelief. "You're my father. You've always been my father." Michael nodded slowly, his eyes avoiding Adam's, and for the first time, he looked unsure of himself. "Yes, I've been your father in every sense of the word, but the truth is, I'm not your biological father. Sarah and I adopted you when you were just a baby. You were placed in our care after your real parents. After they couldn't care for you anymore." The words hung in the air like smoke, suffocating everyone in the room. Samantha could feel the room spinning around her as her mind tried to process the revelation. She had always known that adoption was an option some parents took, but she never imagined that her brother Adam was adopted. "You're lying," Adam whispered, shaking his head. "There's no way. This isn't true. Why would you lie about something like this? Why keep it from me all this time?" His voice cracked, the anger and confusion evident. Sarah finally broke down, sobbing softly, her shoulders shaking. "We didn't want to hurt you. We loved you from the moment we held you in our arms. You were our son, no matter where you came from. But there were things we couldn't share with you, things that happened before we found you, things that we never wanted you to know." Samantha's head was spinning. She turned to Adam, seeing the hurt and anger in his eyes. The pain of a lifetime of trust shattered in an instant. She had always thought they had a perfect family. A family who stuck together no matter what. A family who shared everything. But this secret, this lie, had been festering for years, silently tearing apart the fabric of their lives. Adam stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor as he pushed himself away from the table. "This isn't happening," he muttered, pacing back and forth. "You're telling me I'm adopted, but you never thought I deserved to know." His voice grew louder, filled with the rage of someone whose world had just crumbled. "All these years, I trusted you. I loved you like a father, and now you're telling me that wasn't even real." Samantha didn't know what to say. She felt the crushing weight of her own emotions, unsure of how to process the overwhelming flood of feelings that threatened to consume her. She had loved Michael, had always seen him as her father. To find out he wasn't her real father, to learn that Adam was adopted, was a shock that she wasn't prepared for. Her world felt like it was unraveling, and she couldn't stop it. "Adam, please," Sarah pleaded, her voice full of remorse. "I'm sorry. We never wanted this for you. You were a part of our family before we even knew your real parents. But we kept the truth from you because we thought you were better off not knowing. We thought you would be happier living in ignorance. With the love we gave you, we never wanted you to feel abandoned or different." Adam stopped pacing and turned sharply to face her. His eyes were red, his chest rising and falling with each breath as he fought to hold back his tears. "How could you think that was the right thing? How could you do that to me? I have a right to know who I really am, to know where I came from." His voice cracked as he shouted, the emotions that had been building for years pouring out in a single, painful moment. "How could you keep that from me? From us?" Samantha stood up slowly, her mind racing as she tried to make sense of everything. She couldn't believe what was happening, but she could see the pain in Adam's eyes, the betrayal. She reached out to her brother, placing a hand on his arm. "Adam, I know this is hard, but we need to try to understand. We need to know what happened, why they made this choice." Adam turned to face her, his expression hardening as he pulled away from her touch. "You don't get it, Sam. You don't know what it's like to have your whole life turned upside down, to find out that everything you thought you knew was a lie. as Samantha stepped back, the sting of his words hitting her harder than she had anticipated. She had been trying to help, to make sense of the situation, but now she was realizing that her own place in all of this was equally uncertain. She too had been deceived. She too had been kept in the dark. "Adam, I know you're angry," she said softly, trying to calm him, "but we need to understand. There's more to this story, right? There's more than just the adoption, isn't there?" Sarah and Michael exchanged a look, and for the first time, they seemed to come to a silent agreement. Michael took a deep breath, his voice quiet but firm. "Yes, there's more. There's something else, something that happened years ago, something we should have told you both. But we couldn't, not then." The silence in the room thickened as Samantha's heart raced. What else was there? What more could they have been hiding? The atmosphere in the room was suffocating, a tense silence hanging between them all, thick with unspoken words and unhealed wounds. Michael and Sarah sat across from each other, their eyes still avoiding contact, as though they were afraid that a glance might expose even more than the words they had already spoken. Adam stood by the window, his back turned to them, staring out into the dark night, as though hoping that somehow the answers would come from the outside world, rather than from within the confines of this house. Samantha remained rooted to the spot, caught somewhere between disbelief and an overwhelming sense of confusion. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest. Everything she had thought she knew about her family was rapidly dissolving. She had always considered her home a sanctuary, a place where the truth was simple, where family meant love and trust above all else. But now, with each passing second, that foundation seemed to be crumbling away, revealing the deep cracks that had been carefully hidden for years. "What's the rest of it, then?" Adam's voice broke through the silence, low but steady, filled with the kind of pain that only a lifetime of betrayal can create. "What is it you're not telling us? You say there's more, but how could there possibly be more after this?" Samantha looked at her mother, who was now clutching her hands tightly in her lap, her face pale and drawn, as though every word was a physical burden she had carried for far too long. Michael was sitting with his hands clasped in front of him, his jaw clenched, as though bracing for the storm that was about to come. The tension in the room was almost palpable. Sarah's voice came softly, almost a whisper, as though speaking any louder would make the truth even harder to bear. "The truth is, the adoption wasn't just about saving you, Adam. It wasn't just about giving you a family when your real parents couldn't. Your biological parents, they weren't just anyone. They were part of something bigger, something dangerous." She hesitated, as though gathering her strength to say the words that would shatter everything they had ever known. Samantha's pulse quickened. "What do you mean? Dangerous? What are you talking about?" Michael finally spoke, his voice gravelly, almost reluctant. "It's true. We knew your real parents before we even knew Sarah was pregnant with you. They were involved in things we didn't fully understand, things that were illegal. We didn't know how deep it went, but they were involved in a criminal organization. When you were born, we were told they couldn't care for you, that they were dangerous people, and that you needed to be kept away from them." Samantha's mind raced as she tried to piece everything together. The idea that Adam's birth parents were part of something criminal was inconceivable, yet Michael's tone suggested this was no mere coincidence. "What do you mean, who kept away?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why didn't you tell us sooner? Why now? If they were dangerous, why didn't you tell Adam the truth when he was old enough to understand?" Adam spun around from the window, his face flushed with anger. "Yeah, why wait until now? Why didn't I get to know who my real parents were? Why didn't I get to make that choice for myself?" Sarah's voice faltered as she spoke. "We couldn't, Adam. You were just a baby. Your real parents, they disappeared shortly after we took you in. We never saw them again. They went into hiding, and we were told to keep you safe, to never mention them. But as you grew older, We feared that you might find out the truth in ways that we couldn't control. We kept you away from any contact, any possible clue that could lead you to them. Samantha's heart sank as she tried to comprehend the full weight of what her mother was saying. The man who had raised Adam, the man they had all thought was their protector, had been hiding a far more complicated truth. The fear, the lies, the constant secrecy. It all made sense now, but it didn't feel any easier to bear. And all of this, Adam muttered, shaking his head, all of this was about keeping me away from my own past, from my own parents. You should have told me. You should have trusted me with the truth. Michael let out a deep breath, clearly struggling with his own guilt. We didn't want you to be part of that world. We didn't want you to get caught up in whatever they were involved in. You were safer with us, away from that life. But now, after all these years, I'm supposed to just accept it. Adam's voice was raw, filled with disbelief. You can't just keep secrets like this. I deserve to know everything. I deserve to know who I am. Samantha stood up slowly, feeling the tension in her chest, the weight of Adam's pain pressing down on her as well. She had always considered Adam to be the one who had it all together, the confident, strong older brother who always knew what to do. But now, she was seeing him unravel before her eyes, and it broke her heart in ways she couldn't describe. Adam, she said quietly, I understand that this is hard, but we need to hear the rest. We need to understand. Please, Mom. Please. Dad, what happened after they disappeared? Sarah wiped her eyes, her face etched with years of guilt. After they left, we were told to forget about them. We were warned by people who were involved with them, people who said we had to keep quiet. Your biological parents weren't just running from the law. They were part of something much larger, something that wasn't just criminal, but dangerous on a scale we couldn't have imagined. Michael nodded grimly. We were told that if we kept quiet and raised you as our own, you'd be safe. But the truth is, we didn't know what we were dealing with. They were running from something far bigger than just the law, and we never expected them to disappear the way they did. We never imagined that they would leave without any trace, without ever contacting you again. And by the time we realized how much we didn't know, it was too late. We had already made the decision to raise you. We couldn't go back, even if we wanted to. Samantha swallowed hard, trying to understand the gravity of what her parents were saying. And you never thought to tell us, to give us some hint about this. We were left in the dark about everything, about who we really are. Adam slammed his fist on the table, the force of his actions startling everyone in the room. No. You were too busy protecting me from the truth to ever consider that I might have been ready for it. I could have handled it. I could have dealt with knowing who I really am. For a moment, the room was silent, and then Sarah spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. We didn't know how to tell you, Adam. You were our son. You still are. Nothing changes that. But the world we've been hiding from you, the world your biological parents were part of, it's not a place you ever wanted to be. And that's why we did it. We wanted to keep you safe, to keep you away from the danger they left behind. Adam stood motionless, his back to them again, staring at the floor, his jaw clenched tight. Samantha could see that he was struggling to keep himself composed, fighting back the tears that seemed so foreign to him. She felt a lump form in her own throat, the weight of the truth pressing down on both of them, suffocating them with its cold reality. You don't know what it's like to live your whole life thinking you know who you are, Adam said quietly, his voice shaking with emotion. And then to find out that everything you've built your life on is just a lie. You don't know what that feels like. Samantha didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to fix this, how to put the pieces of their broken family back together. But one thing was clear. This was only the beginning. The truth had been revealed, but there were still so many more questions to answer. What happened to Adam's birth parents? What kind of dangers had they been involved in? And most importantly, What would this revelation mean for the future of their family? The answers, it seemed, would not come easily. The silence that followed Adam's outburst felt like an eternity, stretching longer than any of them had anticipated. Each of them seemed lost in their own thoughts, unsure of what to say or how to move forward. The weight of the moment was crushing, a suffocating presence that hung over the room like a storm cloud. Samantha could see the strain in her mother's face, the guilt that was etched in every line. Her father, though silent, was trembling ever so slightly, almost imperceptible to anyone who wasn't paying attention. Adam's back remained turned to them, and Samantha could feel the distance between them growing. He had always been her protector, her older brother who knew how to handle any situation. But now, he was broken in a way that no one could fix, not without unraveling the layers of secrets that had been so carefully guarded for so long. Where do we go from here? Samantha's voice was barely a whisper, breaking the silence as she finally found the courage to speak. She hadn't realized until now how much she had been holding back, how much she had bottled up inside. But the question she asked hung in the air, as though it were more of a plea than anything else. It was the question they all needed an answer to. "I don't know," Sarah replied softly, her voice cracking with emotion. "I wish I had an answer. I wish I could fix this, but I can't change the past. All I can do is tell you what happened, tell you everything I know. The rest is up to you." Michael's face had hardened, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a deep sadness, as though he was carrying a burden that was too heavy to bear. "We can't change what we did, what we kept hidden," he said quietly, his voice low and filled with regret. "But I hope you understand why we did it. We were scared. We were trying to protect you, Adam. Protect both of you." Adam, still facing the window, turned his head slightly but did not meet anyone's gaze. "How do you expect me to understand that? You kept the truth from me for my whole life, and now you expect me to just accept it. I don't even know who I am anymore." His voice broke, a tremor of raw emotion beneath his words that seemed to resonate through the room. Samantha stepped forward, wanting to comfort him, but unsure of how. She could see how much he was hurting, and it tore her apart. She had always admired Adam's strength, his ability to keep everything together, but now he seemed so fragile, so broken. "Adam," she said softly, her voice filled with sympathy, "I know this is hard. I can't imagine what you're going through right now, but I'm here for you. We're both in this together. Whatever happens next, we face it as a family." Adam's shoulders stiffened at her words, but he didn't turn around. "You don't get it, Sam. You didn't grow up thinking everything was a lie. You didn't spend your whole life trusting people who were just pretending. It's not the same." The words stung, but Samantha held her ground. She understood the pain, but she didn't know how to reach him. The only thing she could offer was her presence, her support, even if that wasn't enough. "I know," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "But we can't change what's happened. We can only move forward. Please, Adam, let me help you." For a moment, there was no response. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning, a dull background noise that somehow felt more intrusive than ever. Then, finally, Adam spoke, his voice barely above a murmur. "I need to know what happened to my real parents. I need to know the truth. All of it. I can't move on without knowing what they were mixed up in. Why they disappeared. Why they left me." Samantha looked at their parents, silently pleading for an answer, her heart racing. She had to admit that the need for closure, for understanding, was there in her own mind too. The truth had come out, but it was still incomplete. There were too many missing pieces, too many questions left unanswered. Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was coming next. "We didn't know everything about your biological parents, Adam," she said slowly. "When we adopted you, we were told that they were involved in a dangerous group. People who were dangerous, not just to you, but to everyone around them. The authorities couldn't protect them anymore, and they were running from something. something much bigger than we ever realized. Michael spoke up, his voice tinged with regret. When we took you in, we were told to cut all ties, to sever all connections. The people we spoke to, the ones who helped us, they said we had to forget about your real parents. They warned us that if we didn't, if we told you the truth, you could end up being caught in the crossfire. We didn't know what they were really involved in, but we were scared, and we made the decision to protect you the best way we knew how. Who were they running from? Samantha asked, her voice trembling with the weight of the question. Why didn't you ever tell us any of this? Why didn't you prepare us for what could have happened? Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, as though steeling herself for the words that were about to come. I don't know all the details, but your biological parents were mixed up with some very dangerous people. They were part of a criminal network that ran operations across the country. They were involved in illegal activities that were far beyond what we could comprehend. When they found out they were going to be exposed, they disappeared. Adam's fists clenched as he turned back toward them, finally meeting their gaze. And you think that's it? You think I'm just supposed to accept that? That I was left behind because my parents were criminals? Is that it? No, Sarah said urgently, her voice almost pleading. No, that's not what we want you to think. We wanted to protect you from the truth, Adam. From the fact that they were involved in things that could have gotten you hurt, that could have put you in danger. We didn't want you to have to live with that knowledge. But now it's different. You have to know, because you deserve the truth. Samantha could see the anguish in her mother's face. This was the moment they had been avoiding for years, the moment they had dreaded, the moment when everything would come out. It wasn't just the fact that Adam was adopted. It was the knowledge that his birth parents had been part of a dangerous world, a world that had left scars on all of them. Adam stood there, his face pale, his body rigid with emotion. He didn't speak for a long time, as if the weight of the truth was too much for him to process all at once. Then, quietly, as if he had reached some kind of quiet resolve, he spoke. I need to know where they are. I need to know what happened to them. I need to understand why they disappeared. They might not have wanted me, but I deserve to know what happened to them. Samantha looked at him, her heart breaking for the brother she had known for so long. Adam, we'll find out. We'll find out everything, but we can't do it alone. We need to stick together as a family. We need to keep supporting each other, no matter what. Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, everything felt uncertain. The family she had always known had been shattered, torn apart by secrets and lies. But even in the chaos, even in the midst of all the unanswered questions, Samantha knew one thing: they had to face this together. There were still many pieces of the puzzle that needed to be uncovered, still many questions left to answer. But the journey to finding the truth had only just begun. And whatever lay ahead, they would have to face it as a family. Because in the end, that was the one thing that still held them together. No matter how broken, no matter how fractured their world had become. The decision was made, though the path forward seemed impossibly murky. There was no clear way to understand what had truly happened to Adam's biological parents, or how their involvement in such a dangerous world had shaped the life they had lived. But for Adam, and for Samantha, the search for answers had become a necessity, an unavoidable journey they couldn't shy away from any longer. The more they learned about their parents' past, the more their world seemed to unravel, leaving behind a tangle of threads that were now impossible to ignore. The next few days were filled with tension. Adam, still reeling from the truth about his biological parents, became withdrawn, his mind consumed by the idea of finding out everything. He had to know what had happened to them, why they had disappeared, and what they had been involved in. Samantha, on the other hand, felt both an intense empathy for her brother's pain and an overwhelming sense of guilt that her family had hidden this truth from her for so long. Every moment in the house felt like a reminder of the lies they had all lived through, and she found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about her parents. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cold, hollow shell. The warmth that had existed between them all seemed to be fading away, replaced by an uncomfortable silence that neither Adam nor their parents seemed to know how to break. But Samantha was determined to help bridge the gap, to bring some sense of normalcy back, even if that meant confronting the truth head-on. She sat down with her mother one afternoon, hoping for a conversation that might help clear the air. "Mum," Samantha began, her voice hesitant. "I know this is hard, but how much do we really know about Adam's biological parents? I mean, are we just going to trust what you were told all those years ago? Or is there something more?" Sarah, sitting across from her at the kitchen table, looked tired, as though the weight of their past was still pressing down on her. She had never truly opened up about the choices she and Michael had made when they first decided to adopt Adam. It had always been something that lingered in the background of their family life, never fully discussed but always there. Now it seemed to be a shadow that stretched over everything they did. "I don't know, Sam," Sarah said, her voice quiet. "I wish I could give you more answers. I wish I could tell you everything that happened. But what we were told all those years ago, it came from people we trusted. We were just following the instructions we were given. They told us to keep Adam away from the truth for his own safety. And we did. But now, I'm not so sure it was the right thing to do." Samantha nodded, her mind racing with the questions that still hadn't been answered. "But we need to find out the truth now, don't we? I mean, Adam deserves to know, and so do we." Sarah looked at her daughter, her eyes filled with regret. I know. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Maybe it's time we looked deeper into it. Maybe it's time we found out who your real grandparents were, where your real parents came from. But I'm scared, Sam. What if we dig up something we're not prepared for? What if this thing we've been trying to protect is bigger than we ever imagined? Samantha couldn't help but feel the weight of her mother's words. She understood the fear that Sarah felt, the sense of having lived with a secret for so long that it had become too dangerous to confront. But she also knew that avoiding the truth would only make it worse. The longer they waited, the more it would fester. They had to face it. They had to go after the answers, no matter how painful it might be. "We have to," Samantha said firmly. "We can't keep running from this. If we want to heal, if we want to move forward, we need to know everything, even if it's ugly, even if it scares us." The conversation ended there, but Samantha's mind continued to churn. She knew there was a way forward, but the journey would be long and uncertain. Adam, still consumed by the need to know the truth, was already making plans to search for any trace of his biological parents. Samantha knew that this wasn't something he could do alone. She had to help him, no matter where it took them. The following weeks passed in a blur of research and inquiries. Adam reached out to private investigators, trying to track down any record of his birth parents. He was relentless, refusing to give up, even when he hit dead ends or faced too many unanswered questions. His obsession with the search became all-consuming, and Samantha found herself growing more concerned. The truth had already taken so much from him, but now it was beginning to take a toll on his mental and emotional state. She watched as he became more withdrawn, his energy focused solely on uncovering the past. Samantha, however, took a different approach. She decided to focus on the present, on their family's future, and on trying to rebuild what had been lost. Every day, she tried to make things feel a little more normal, a little less fractured. She spent time with her parents, asking about the early days of their marriage, the years before Adam and she were born. In some ways, she felt like she was trying to reconnect the pieces of a puzzle that had been scattered and forgotten. But it wasn't enough. No matter how hard she tried to keep the family together, the rift between Adam and their parents was growing wider. He couldn't let go of the past, and they couldn't escape the mistakes they had made. It wasn't until a breakthrough came one fateful evening that everything shifted. Adam had received a call from the private investigator. A name had surfaced. A man who had been connected to his birth parents, someone who might hold the answers they were searching for. The investigator had tracked down a woman who had known Adam's real parents before they disappeared, a woman who might be able to provide crucial details about the circumstances surrounding their lives. Adam was eager to meet her, to hear what she had to say, but Samantha was worried. She could see how desperate he had become, how far he was willing to go to find the truth. And she couldn't shake the fear that this woman might not hold the answers he was hoping for. What if the truth was even darker than they imagined? What if Adam's birth parents were involved in something so dangerous, so violent, that uncovering the facts could tear their family apart even more? But Samantha knew that she couldn't stop Adam. He had come this far, and there was no turning back now. They had to meet this woman. They had to hear her story. The night they planned to meet her, they sat in the car together. Adam at the wheel, his jaw tight with determination, and Samantha beside him, her thoughts a whirlwind of uncertainty. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Samantha asked, her voice soft. "I mean, what if this woman isn't who we think she is?" Adam didn't answer immediately. His eyes were fixed on the road ahead, and Samantha could tell that he was wrestling with his own doubts. "I don't know," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "But I have to know. I can't keep living like this. I have to understand who they were. I have to understand why they left." Samantha nodded, squeezing his hand. "I get it, Adam. But we don't have to do this alone. I'm here with you, no matter what happens next." As they arrived at the small cafe where they were supposed to meet the woman, Samantha's heart raced. This was the moment when the last pieces of their family's mystery would be revealed. No matter how painful, no matter how terrifying, they were going to uncover the truth. The door opened and a woman stepped inside, her face partially obscured by a scarf. She looked around the room, her eyes scanning the space, until they landed on Adam and Samantha. For a moment, everything seemed to stop, the weight of the moment pressing in on them. This was the person who held the key to the past, the final link to Adam's biological parents. Adam stood up slowly, his hands clenched at his sides, and Samantha followed his lead, her heart beating faster with each passing second. The woman approached them, her eyes tired, but sharp, filled with the kind of knowledge that only comes from living through something difficult. "You must be Adam?" she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I've been expecting you." And so, with that simple statement, the final chapter of their family's hidden truth was about to begin. What she was going to tell them would change everything again. But one thing was certain: there was no turning back now. The woman's gaze met Adam's with an intensity that made the air around them feel heavy. Her face, worn by years of struggle, carried a weight of unspoken stories that seemed to linger between her words. She stepped into the small cafe, her presence filling the space, as she sat across from Adam and Samantha. The tension in the room was thick, so much so that it felt almost suffocating, yet neither of them dared to break the silence. The woman's name was Eleanor, and as she spoke, her voice was tinged with a sadness that echoed through the years of pain she had undoubtedly endured. "I knew your parents, Adam," she began, her voice barely a whisper, as if she were afraid to speak too loudly. "I knew them before they disappeared. They were not who they seemed to be. But you need to understand, their disappearance wasn't just about running from the law or hiding from danger. There was something much bigger at play." Adam's fingers tightened on the table, his knuckles white as he leaned forward, eager for the answers he had spent so long searching for. "What do you mean? Who were they really? What were they involved in?" His voice trembled with the intensity of his question, the desperation of wanting to know the truth. Eleanor took a deep breath, her eyes drifting downward for a moment, as if she were gathering the courage to speak. Your parents were involved in something far more dangerous than we realized. It wasn't just criminal activity. They were caught up in a network of people who had connections to organized crime, political corruption, and even covert government operations. They weren't just running from the law. They were running from people who would do anything to silence them. And it wasn't just about them anymore. It was about you too, Adam. Samantha felt a chill run down her spine. She had always suspected that there was more to their story than her parents had let on, but hearing it now, so starkly, felt like the ground was giving way beneath her. She looked over at Adam, who had become rigid, his jaw clenched tightly. The words seemed to hit him like a tidal wave, overwhelming him with the sheer enormity of what Eleanor was revealing. "What do you mean, it's about me?" Adam asked, his voice hoarse. "How could it be about me? What did I have to do with all of this?" And Eleanor's eyes softened as she regarded him, her expression filled with pity. "They kept you away from it all, Adam. But the truth is, you were never meant to be hidden from this. Your parents didn't just vanish because of their mistakes. They were trying to protect you. You see, they had a plan for you. They wanted you to have a different life, away from all the dangers they were entangled in. They thought that by giving you up, by letting you go, they could keep you safe." Samantha's heart ached as she watched Adam absorb the weight of Eleanor's words. The world he had known, the family he had grown up with, was now shattering in front of his eyes. Everything he had believed to be true, everything that had shaped his identity, was suddenly in question. "Why didn't they tell me?" Adam asked, his voice breaking, the hurt evident in his eyes. "Why didn't they let me know who I really was? Why couldn't they have prepared me for this?" Eleanor's expression hardened, her eyes filled with a mix of regret and sorrow. "Because they didn't want you to be part of their world. They were hoping you would grow up without knowing. They wanted you to have a chance at a life without the shadow of their past hanging over you. But they knew, deep down, that their enemies would find you one day, and when they did, they would use you against them. That's why they disappeared. They were trying to protect you, but in the end, it wasn't enough." Adam sat back in his chair, his face pale, his mind clearly racing to comprehend what he had just been told. "So, all this time I've been living a lie. My whole life was built on a lie," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. "I thought I was just like everyone else, that I had a normal family, that my parents loved me. And now I find out that they were hiding me from something so big, so dangerous, that they had to me up just to keep me safe." Eleanor nodded grimly. "Yes, Adam. That's exactly what happened. And I'm sorry. I never wanted you to find out like this. But now that you know, you need to understand the full picture. Your parents didn't disappear just to escape their past. They did it for you. They wanted to give you a chance at something better." Samantha reached out, her hand resting gently on her brother's arm. She could feel the storm of emotions brewing inside him, the confusion, the anger, the pain. "Adam," she said softly, her voice steady. "This changes everything. But we're still family. Whatever the truth is, we'll face it together. You're not alone in this." Adam turned his head slowly to look at her, his eyes raw with emotion. "How can you say that, Sam? How can you say I'm still your brother when everything about my past has been a lie? I don't even know who I am anymore." Samantha's heart twisted with sadness, but she refused to look away. "I know this is hard," she said, her voice unwavering. "But family isn't about the past. It's about what we do now together. You're still my brother. And no matter what happens, we'll stick together. We'll find a way through this." Adam took a deep breath, as if trying to steady himself, before he nodded slowly, the anger in his expression shifting into something else, perhaps resignation, or maybe even the faintest glimmer of hope. "I don't know if I can ever be okay with this," he whispered, "but I'll try. For you, Sam." Eleanor watched them silently, her eyes filled with both sadness and admiration. "I wish I could give you more answers, Adam. But there are things I can't tell you. Your parents? They wanted to protect you from it all. And now it's up to you to decide what you do with this information. I can't make that decision for you. Samantha nodded, her gaze shifting back to Eleanor. Thank you for telling us what you know. I know it wasn't easy, and I know it must have been hard to come forward. But we need to understand this. We need to know everything. Eleanor stood up, her movements slow and deliberate, as though she was preparing to leave a chapter of her own past behind. I hope you find what you're looking for, she said, her voice quiet but sincere. But remember, sometimes the truth isn't as freeing as we think it will be. Sometimes it just leaves us with more questions. As she turned to leave, Adam stood up too, his hand gripping the back of his chair. Wait, he said, his voice tinged with a new urgency. Do you know anything about where they went? Is there any way we can find them? Any trace of them left? Eleanor paused at the door, her hand on the handle. She looked back at Adam, her eyes softening. I'm afraid not. They're gone, Adam. And I don't think you'll find them. But what you can find is peace. You can make your own life, your own choices. And maybe that's the best way to honor them, to live the life they wanted for you. With that, she left, disappearing into the night, leaving Adam and Samantha alone at the table. The weight of her words hung in the air, heavy and unsettling. Samantha turned to her brother, watching him carefully. He looked lost, like a man caught between two worlds, one of the past that had been forced upon him, and one of an uncertain future that seemed almost too vast to comprehend. I don't know where we go from here, Adam murmured, his voice tinged with a quiet sadness. But I know one thing for sure. I'm not going to keep running from it. I'm going to find my own way forward. Samantha smiled softly, her heart aching for him. Whatever happens, Adam, we'll face it together. And with that, they sat in the silence, the storm of emotions slowly settling, knowing that though their family's past had been fractured by lies, the future, whatever it held, was still theirs to shape. The journey ahead would be difficult, filled with questions and uncertainties, but as long as they were together, they could face anything. And so, the truth, no matter how painful, was no longer a burden to bear. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where the pieces of their fractured family could finally start to heal. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe and like the video.